to give me as a kid. So it's 2023, I just moved back into my parents' house after dropping out of university. I've literally got no income, my bank account is looking dreadful, and I need to make this online business thing work. So I devised my master plan. I'm going to wake up every day at like 6 a.m, I'm going to go for a run, then I'm going to have a cold shower, and I'm going to have the biggest batch of deep work that you can even think of. And it goes well. I wake up, I go on the run, although it's not easy, I just get up and do it, and I get into the cold shower. Although I've had to use a bunch of willpower at this point, I do the things which are supposed to give me dopamine. I woke up early in the morning, got the sunlight, I have my runner's high, and I'm even getting the cold exposure. So my dopamine should be looking something like this right up here. And then I go back to bed because I'm tired, because I'm sleep deprived. But tomorrow is going to be different. So tomorrow I wake up, I get up at the same time, I've slept a bit more now, I go for my run, I get myself to actually do it, I go get my cold shower, but I still don't start working because I'm cold. I tell myself just 2 more minutes back in my bed, I'm not going to fall asleep, but I do. I inevitably do. That week, I think I had about 1 day when I didn't have this pattern happen in one way or another. And it made me realize that this whole dopamine scam that we've been sold is very different to what actually happens in reality. What I realized at this point is that dopamine is one thing, okay? It's important, but it's only one thing of the equation. And the second thing, which is actually above it, which governs how you act with the dopamine which you have, is your frequency. You can think of this as a collage of your thoughts and your emotions. The reason this is so important is because if you think back to my example, I was getting out of my cold shower, and I was getting the thoughts, damn, we're so cold, we need to get back into bed. My emotions were that of someone who felt discomfort. Do you think I was motivated to get to work? Again, my dopamine probably looked something like this. It was at a peak, okay? So I could have used it for getting myself into action for any kind of pursuit. You already know that by now. Dopamine is not the reward hormone. It's more of the pursuit neurotransmitter, right? It gets you to act in certain ways. But the thing is, the way I wanted to act in this moment was determined by my frequency, which was quite a negative one at that. And the reason why I used this dopamine peak for a wrong thing is because of that, because it isn't that simple. We think that having a high in dopamine is enough to get our best deep work block done ever, and that's not the case. And sometimes you might actually find that the best work you do comes when you're in a state of lower dopamine. I know it's very counterintuitive, but stay with me here. A block of instant gratification might look something like this. Your dopamine goes up momentarily, but then it goes down below baseline and it slowly climbs back up. If we do this again and again and again, we eat the chocolate, then we eat a bit more because we have a craving, we scroll on our phone, then we feel like very negative dopamine, so we scroll even more. Might look like multiple of these, but kind of stacked on top of each other. We kind of feel this slide down, we go back on the instant gratification thing, we get another spike, and it goes kind of like this until we're down in the trenches, right? If this is our baseline, we're now in the trenches because we've just abused these substances. And what ends up happening is in these instances, after we use these substances, we are in a funny way motivated. This is called compulsion. This basically means that we're not motivated by drive, by like a positive kind of frame of mind. We're solely motivated to get ourselves a fix, right? That's what addicts call it. This is very, very adjacent to addiction. What you want in this kind of state when you're down here is a fix to get you back to baseline, to feel normal again. And that's why you use the instant gratification again, because it's going to get you back here for a few seconds, but then you're just going to need even more, and this is quite literally what addiction is. But what I'm trying to say is, in a funny way, you can be more motivated down here than you are up here. And there's ways to take advantage of this. For example, I don't know about you, but I had times in my life when I did a bunch of the stupid stuff. I slept in, I didn't have a good day, maybe I had like a bad conversation with someone, and then, I scrolled on Instagram for like an hour, and I was really, really feeling shameful, really, really bad, and I was probably like down here in terms of dopamine as well. And that got me into kind of a state of mind, into a frequency, if you will, of absolute motivation. So I need you to notice that these two things are quite distinct, quite dissimilar to each other. Although they might seem similar in some certain senses, they're not actually one and the same. So dopamine is the thing that drives you towards a certain behavior. It's kind of that neurochemical which talks to the part of your brain and says, hey, we want you to do this, we want you to do that. Even movement, just me moving my hands around, requires dopamine. If you didn't have any dopamine, you'd be literally paralyzed. And what your frequency, your thoughts and your emotions do is they also talk to your brain and they give you cues on what to act towards. What I'm trying to say is one can't really coexist without the other. You need both to get positive action. Now, of course, I said that sometimes having low dopamine might be an advantage, and that might be the case. For example, in this instance, what I was talking about, when I was really in the gutter and I was feeling really down on dopamine, I got into a state of mind where I was like, fuck it, I'm going to grind, I'm going to go for a run right now. And that's what I did. Now, that is not too common because most of the time when you do these kind of positive activities, again, it's going to be in a higher state of dopamine. But I want you to realize, just based on this example, sometimes most of the time, this is actually much more important than dopamine itself. Even if you're in the trenches and even if you're feeling low, if you're just fired up, if you're just disgusted, and if you're, it might be not too wholesome to act out of a negative place of emotion, but it works. If you're feeling like this, if you have rage inside of you and you need a change, you're going to go for that run. You're going to go to the gym. You're going to start working. It might not be easy. So the best case scenario is when we have a high frequency and a high dopamine level. But it is definitely doable regardless of, I haven't done my biohacking routine. You can still get into action. So what I do right now in the morning is I make myself what I want to eat. I make myself a delicious oatmeal. I kind of care about, how nutritious it is, but I haven't looked into how much tyrosine they give me, which is therefore synthesized into dopamine. I haven't looked into that fucking bullshit. I also make myself a flat white because that's the kind of coffee that I like to consume. I don't do visualizations. I don't, take cold showers and stuff like this. Although these are scientifically proven to elevate my dopamine level. I could be, let's say, at this level if I did these things. Right now, let's say I'm at this level. Although this is, of course, higher than this level, I am much more likely to act and get into work when I'm at this level because I don't hate my life. If I actually had a cold shower and if I did my visualizations, I would get the thought, I'd be shifted into the frequency of, oh damn, I wasted half an hour already where I could have been productive. That's the kind of thought I'm going to have in this situation because my morning routine is much longer. Also, the kind of thoughts I'm going to have is, damn, I'm cold. I'm feeling this uncomfortable emotion. I should probably get back into bed. I'm going to get these cues to drive me in a certain way, which I don't want to go in. Now, I'm not saying that these things are bad, necessarily getting a cold shower, visualizing, or whatever kind of catalyst you might choose. But the thing is, you have to take both of these into account. If I were to kind of conceptualize these two things in a much more simpler way, I would say this is how driven you are to actually put in the work and to actually do something. And this is kind of the want behind it. Do you actually want to do the thing? Because, this dopamine can be used for the wrong reason. If you get the kind of thoughts which really push you in a direction to have a conversation or, I don't know, watch a bunch of YouTube videos, you could use this drive, this dopamine that you have, to do that, which is the wrong thing for you in this instance. The best morning routine, the best schedule, the best way to live your life is to kind of think of both, which in a weird way comes from not thinking about either too much. Now, of course, don't do the basic stupid shit. If you have your phone beside your bed, you're probably going to reach for it right away, and that's just going to send your dopamine down into the gutter right away as you wake up. That's something we don't want. The common pitfalls are still there for a reason, right? You still want to avoid them to kind of maximize your dopamine just to a certain level. But as I said in this example, if I'm going to be in a worse state of mind, if I'm gonna have to use a bunch of willpower and I'm gonna have to waste time on doing a bunch of stupid shit which will boost my dopamine by 10-20%, I'm not really keen on doing that. I have a much easier time, getting into work now, and I'm here because I did my morning routine, which I enjoyed. It's kind of the same thing with the gym. You can have the most perfect optimized routine, or you could have like a routine which is like 85% optimized. But if you're gonna have the perfect routine, you're going to go twice a week because it's just going to be so hard to get yourself to go. And with this one, which you fucking enjoy, you're going to go 5 times because it's just so much better. And you're going to be much more jacked as a result. So in short, always optimize for your frequency. If you can want to do the work, that's the state you should get yourself into. Not necessarily a driven one, because if you're driven to do the wrong thing, that's not an ideal thing to do. And of course, dopamine still matters, but just keep in mind that your frequency and the cues that your mind is giving you are much more important.